Welcome everybody. You're sitting a bit far back. Does that feel comfortable for you? You're not going to move forward yet. Well, we'll see what we can do about that. And welcome to Leading from the Inside. I think it was also described as leadership development from within on one of the programs. But if you're here because you're involved in leadership development, yep, you're in the right place. Everyone involved in leadership development in some way? Yep. Who is involved as a buyer of leadership development? Anyone buying? Who's involved in selling leadership development? So my two ways of categorizing people involved in leadership development, they haven't really flown, have they? I'll give you, let's take another approach to that. I'm Peter Lodemore, I work for Pearl Catchers. I'm an external provider of leadership development, so I'll design programs, particularly for your organisation, come along and deliver them. So Hannah Bell, Hannah Bell works for one of the organisations I did that with, the Durham Constabulary. So she's an employee. So I would say Hannah's almost like a buyer, yeah. So for leadership development, so she would manage me on a day-to-day basis. And I would actually deliver some of my, deliver some of my stuff to people like Andy Harrelson sitting there. So if you wasn't aware you're sitting among police, you are, be careful. And so, who's like me and on the outside coming into organisations providing leadership development of some sort? Thank you, thank you. Is everybody else on the inside of an organisation who may be providing stuff themselves or buying it in? Yeah, I knew we'd get there. Fantastic. So what we want to do is, well, this is all about a programme I designed particularly for the Durham Constabulary, called it the Giant Leap Programme. And the great thing about that was I spent about a year working with the Durham Constabulary, working with the Chief Constable and the top 45 senior most leaders. And about 5 months after that programme finished, they was inspected. There was a Gestapo-like inspection that happened for every single constabulary in England and Wales. Anyone know how many constabularies there are in England and Wales? Why would you know? 43. 43. Only one constabulary got an outstanding inspection, evaluation. Guess which one it was? The Durham Constabulary, and their strong visible leadership was cited as a main cause. So I think we've had a lot of success in running leadership development, and Hannah also this year, she's very modest, she wouldn't say this, but on her behalf I can say she was put up for an award for inspiring leadership this year, a national award, National Police Award, and she won that as well. So ladies and gentlemen, you're in good company. Yeah, for Hannah. So, what we want to do is, Leading from the Inside really is about our experience of partnering for a program that spanned about a year, and kind of what we went through with that. And I kind of thought, if you're in this business as well, then you'd have had your own experiences of trying to put on leadership development, try to work with senior leaders in particular. So I thought, this is the experiential learning zone, right? So to make good our contract around this being it, I need you to bring your experience to the party. So I'm going to give you one or two options on questions that I want you to answer, and you can answer whichever one you feel compelled towards answering. So the first question is, what drives you nuts about senior leaders? What drives you nuts about senior leaders? Or the second question is, what do you think seems to work and what doesn't work around senior leader or just leadership development? So when you're thinking of running a program, what kind of thing works, what kind of thing doesn't work? And I'm going to give you a minute to get your thoughts straight for yourself. Is anyone particularly attracted towards the what drives you nuts question? Yeah? What drives you nuts? I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, everybody's face like.
What drives you? Should we just stick to the what drives you nuts? I tell you why I'd like that. Because I'm about to release 10 blogs over 10 weeks about senior leaders, senior leader development, and most of it's about what drives me nuts about them. So I want to do some original research with you people. Can I ask you to write down the thing about senior leaders that drives you nuts? You don't have to put your name. In fact, I'm going to give you a card. Can you hold that? Thank you. Do you want to take a card and pass them on, please? If you take a card and pass them on. You don't have to identify yourself on this. I would just like a pile of cards that suggest to me the reason why senior leaders drive you particularly crazy.
You all got one. You've got a few. You've got a few down.
Do you need more cards? Yes. Well, please feel free. This is a cathartic experience. We can share this stuff. Would you like some more cards?
We can offer like self-help afterwards.
Yes. I think we're going to do some sharing.
Right, shall I go and collect them in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is also going to be a memory test.
Who's was whose? Thank you. Any more?
Cheers.
Are you ready now? Yeah, there's some great.
So what I'm going to suggest is have a quick share of the thing that drives you nuts about seniors. This is the cathartic bit, right? So it's okay having the thought, but what will be quite helpful, I think, is to share that with your colleagues. So what I'm going to suggest is we'll have 4 minutes doing a bit of networking. So have some quick shares. You can also get up and share, find out what someone else said, and we will come back together, and then we're going to share our list of the things that kind of drove us nuts running this very successful leadership development program, and in the nicest possible way. I mean, it drove us nuts. But so 4 minutes, bit of networking, share. Have you had a share? You've had a quick share. Okay, we're going to stay connected. We did think about wearing a zebra outfit for this, so we could share being a pantomime kind of. And so now we're going to be connected because we're going to be sharing this one. Was that helpful? People have similar issues to yourself, cathartic to share it, you're not on your own. And we've had a quick look through and we're delighted with the level of honesty, I should put it that way, the level of honesty and sharing that we have. And the language, it's very good, particularly, so.
Everything on the card that's been written down, there isn't one single item on here or anything that you've shared that we didn't encounter when we first started, whereas my background before coming into this arena of leadership was covert policing, so I've not really had much experience of any senior leadership team apart from the specialist area. And I think there that it's the attitude that they sometimes think that they know better because they've had lots of different training. There's a real hierarchy, or there used to be, with some of our senior officers, that they'd experienced lots of time on weeks and weeks of courses down at the College of Policing. The poor communications down, and we had so many of our senior leaders saying, I don't need to really come to that, but my team does. It's all right that I've already done something similar. So it was really, the start was, it happened quite well, didn't it? Because bill catchers were leaving following a huge training program for our middle managers, and then in came Peter. So it was a little bit of, well, why do we need that now, and what is he going to do? And I think that we had a culture beforehand, didn't we, which was entertain me, and then whoever we brought in to do any training, that they would critique them, like they were going to score them on the X Factor or the Voice and decide whether we liked them or whether we were going to get them back again, or what was their daily rate. But everything here in relation to the way that the cuts have given people and some of our senior leaders the impression that we don't have the money for any leadership, as if leadership is the luxury, that they don't really know what they want. So when they're asking for training, that they want something that's going to be quite quick, where they don't have to do anything. And the lack of humility at events, I think that's something that we're going to touch on later, isn't it? And another, change their mind. And the lack of consistency in the messages, whereas communications was a huge element when you first started with some of the teams. So there's no surprises.
No. In fact, they're a classic case as an organisation, because what they did first off was bought in a middle management program. And so whenever you're buying in a program, it kind of suggests where you think the issues are, right, that need some training, learning and developing. So the senior managers were blissfully free of any of that, because it didn't touch them. And we had a whole bunch of middle managers. We was dealing with rooms of 50 at a time, and I can honestly say Andy's a very friendly looking one. Most of them are really quite frightening. And they were quite angry because they hadn't been that involved in the change. So we was directly addressing people who had felt quite powerless, quite kind of changed, and had a lot of feelings about that. So we had 2 days. That was how the whole thing launched. And it was only after that was completed, and I think developing relationships with the senior most leadership, that they actually thought, I think we need some leadership too. It also coincided with the appointment of a new chief constable. So the person who had been deputy for the middle manager program was appointed chief constable. He asked me to coach him. He then asked me to go on and design a program for the top 45 senior police. Andy was part of that program, 45 people, and that's how it worked. And we was very honest from the beginning. So I met, because I'd coached the chief exec, it helped me understand his approach to leadership. I then met individually with a lot of senior leaders, and I developed a kind of position statement about, this is, I think, the ground that you've covered, taking stock of where you are, this is where you are now, and I think this is what's ahead. And then I had some focus groups with senior leaders where I shared that. So it was like, have I got this right? Does this ring bells? And on the back of that, we then had about 6 half days with these 45. So it was about every 6 weeks, wasn't it? And we ended at Christmas in a kind of festive fashion. So that was roughly what we did. And the first, I'll just say this, and then we'll go through our favourite words that describes this experience. The way I run things, the Giant Leap program, the way it works is I will get you together for day 1 for the launch, and we will imagine your success into the future, start to imagine that, envision it, find your passion, and find out all of these kind of things. And so for the Durham Constabulary, it worked really well, because the Chief Constable said, I'm going to be in this job for 5 years. So we had a 2018 timeline. Where do you want to be by 2018? And every single session followed on from the content that came through in that particular visioning session. And it was some of the things you'd probably expect, like empowerment, team working, how do we do that kind of thing. So it was kind of, and what was great was the vision was, we want to be the best force on the planet by 2018. I know, and you go like, wow, okay. But they've already become the best force in the UK halfway through that process, right? So not as crazy as it might sound. And one of the things that really flew was when we took that aspiration into that first launch session, people were really hungry for that. For thinking, wow, yeah, we could be absolutely that big, we could grow into this possibility. So that had quite a profound effect, and that started to become part of the culture very quickly, about being the best. So that's the way we could start to talk, and then teams could start to talk about, well, what is the best dog handling team on the planet look like? Does it look like us? So suddenly there was a kind of lever for ramping up aspirations. So that's roughly what we did. We did some other things in the middle that may come up. Should we share our list of words? We could have had a list that said engagement, involvement, participation. But we've got this list. We can remember it better. So what we're going to do is this is that part of the proceedings where we can say, pick a word. Any particular words stand out. A lot of them will connect to things that you've already said. So perhaps we can have this as a kind of interactive session. Any particular words stand out that you would like to start off with? What kind of mood are you in? Are you going to say it? Arse out. Thank you, Beric. Can we give him a round of applause for saying the thing that everyone was thinking?
We tried to make it look a little bit like a bottom, but it wasn't doing very well.
Arse out.
Yeah.
This one was really important because lots of our senior leaders had relationships where they'd worked together for a number of years, but they didn't really know each other. So we really started to explore what was underneath and to strip back, because as senior police officers as well, that there is that need of the mask and the facade and the armour. So we really wanted to break that down. And the reason why we said this one is that we thought that it was a little bit like seeing a bum on a wedding video, that you really do know that it's there, but when you see it out there on the screen, dancing away to jostling around somebody else's guy, then you think, yeah, I knew it was there, but seeing it can be quite an experience. And we found that we needed to create that space and that narrative so that people could really find out about each other. And some of it they didn't really like, did they, when we did the exercise where they couldn't speak and they had to look into each other's eyes. That caused quite a bit of controversy. But those people that have had that experience are now working much better together because they've had that uncomfortable silence.
Yeah.
So with this, that we thought, with the arse out, that it was, I think we're drawing quite a crowd for Peter saying that.
There's more by the second.
Yeah.
Keep going.
That they really felt that, right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this properly, and we really have to share differences about us, about our family, and that we have to really strip back to our own self and have that humility to say, well, do you know what, sometimes it can be really difficult, sometimes it feels lonely up there, and to really make those connections.
Yeah. And I'd say the arse out thing worked from the very beginning, and this is how we talked when we was there, so it seems right to kind of share that. But even from the point where I talked to a few people and then wrote everything down and then shared it with focus groups of senior managers, these were massive moments of truth for the program, for the Giant Leap program, for me. Who is this bloke? Is this going to be the same as everything else we've ever done? Is this going to be honest? What level of honesty are we going? So Terry Leahy in his book 10 Words of Management, anyone ever read that book? Just me? Okay, the first word is honesty. So you want to create more intelligent organisations, more successful organisations, you've got to take honesty to the next level. It's the first thing you have to do. And we had to walk the talk on that, so that was quite frightening. It was also happening at a time where police and criminal PCC crime commissioners were being appointed, and policing was becoming more locally accountable. There was more publicity, and suddenly there was a document that kind of could have been used to say these people aren't perfect, because of course no one is, and we have to recognise that in development, but it's different writing that down. So we had support for how honest I felt I could be. So that was the kind of arse out thing as well. That I think it was really important to demonstrate this is different, it's interesting, we're not just going to speak superficially, we're going to try and grapple with some real issues that we have. And I think that helped with the buy-in. That was my understanding of that. That was a challenge for all of us, I think.
Yeah, great for that cross-command working as well, wasn't it?
Yes. Thank you. So sometimes what we would do when we had the big vision, we'd then say to each of the departments or the commands, So what are your priorities for the next 12 months? And once we did that, we'd say, right, other commands, go and visit their piece of paper and what they're saying are their priorities and what they're good at, and give them some feedback. Do you think they're the right priorities? That was kind of invented on the wing, in the room, and it really worked as well. So the more we kind of helped these conversations to happen, we facilitated these conversations, and it happened. Once you realise this needs to happen, you keep finding different ways to make it happen. So I do recommend that, getting different departments to give each other feedback. We took that down to an individual level as well. So let's have another word. Dumbo feather. I like that. It's over to you again. That's your word.
The Dumbo feather, that was one that really struck us, that as senior police officers and senior leaders, that there was lots of courses that were going on. There was some of them were looking at expensive degree courses, the Wings Leadership Programme, all of which were really expensive. So we found that there was still, regardless of how well that the Giant Leap programme was going, there was still that dependency on the badges of which course has been signed up with the ILN and how many CPD points has this got. And I think that it took quite a few sessions, isn't it, for them to realise that Dumbo had his feather, but he could fly anyway, and to realise that this may not be an accreditation, it may not have got points, it may not go towards your degree, but the learning from this is on a much deeper level than anything that they'd experienced before. And I think once they realised that they didn't need a Dumbo feather, that they started to really throw themselves into the different elements of it, and really started to use some of the work that we were doing outside with their teams as well. So even when we weren't in the room, that there was still heavily trusting some of the new learning that Peter had given them.
Sure.
90% engagement into that. That's what we needed.
Yeah, and I think as well that with the engagement, that the culture that we'd had before was to sit back and be entertained, that they realised that we needed 90% from them each and every single time. They needed all of themselves in the room, in all of their awesomeness, all at the same time, rather than just coming half in, half out, and then getting the deliberate phone calls to go out, to get away from it, which I'm sure that you're all laughing there, that you know that that's what they used to do. If it got a little bit hot under the pitch, that they would make their exit. And that started to really, it was few and far between, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, they realised that they had got to absolutely be fully immersed in this for it to work, or else it was pointless.
Yeah. But I think we all have our Dumbo feathers as well, don't we? And that's something, if you're around tomorrow, there's a session, Happy Unstoppable Genius You, that I'm running. I think it's 11 o'clock. So if you're around, come along and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll talk about one of these things that I think we all need, which is a fluffer. Have you come across this concept? So Hannah would have said she was my fluffer. This is a term I understand from the pornography industry.
I didn't know that at the time.
She didn't know that at the time, but it kind of works for me. So going and facing this crowd, Hannah would turn up, I'd turn up early, and she was going, it's going to be fine, you're great, you don't worry about it. You know, we all need fluffers, don't we? Is it a Dumbo feather? I don't know what it is, but I think one of the things I'm going to say tomorrow is surround yourself, invest in fluffer relationships. I've got a big presentation tomorrow, I need some fluffing, give it to me, give me the good stuff, because we just need that. There's nothing wrong with saying that, is that? So I think we all need a bit of Dumbo feathering. And I'll pick up on one other point, the magpie element, because it picks up on what Hannah was saying about what people are buying. And for me, that's kind of almost like some people treat buying training as a retail experience. What was that again? So they want something that's straight off the shelf, it's going to be really glossy, it's going to be highly spun, beautiful website. I don't know who's going to come and deliver it. It won't be tailored, and so it won't really fit and fly with your people. It will be my view, but we can be kind of naive in our purchasing. I've found that as a provider. You go in somewhere and you're thinking, I'm not sure why you've bought this, and no one else has been involved in it, and it probably felt like a good idea at the time, but now I'm actually standing in front of all your senior leaders. This isn't the case with Durham. We went through quite a complicated process to get to the room, but it's happening a lot to me at the moment. So that's a shout out for, we need more sophisticated clienting, I think. And let's see it less as a retail experience and more like a wedding. You'd want your fingerprints all over the wedding, wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? You need to do that. So we can't just buy, because I think if we don't think about it that way, then we think there's some magic in the words that someone's going to come along and bring. And of course, this is the entertainment thing Hannah was saying, because really people are anxious coming to the room to do senior leadership development, and especially when they have to start participating and not sitting there and just listening. It is quite tough, and what they'd really like to do to get over their anxieties is to come along, see the reassuring PowerPoint, settle into their chair, think, I know this, right? I know this. I can make some notes, I can frown at the appropriate places, I can engage with it with my little thinky mind, and I'll leave here and it won't really affect me whatsoever, right? That's the way it kind of works, isn't it? The standard industry stuff, and you've got to punch through that kind of thing. And it's tough on my end, because you kind of want to play to the entertainment element. You want them to walk out and go, yeah, it was good, that was good, I've got a couple of stories, I'll use them, a couple of jokes, that was all right, you know what I mean? And that would be a session, tick the box. So from Hannah's point of view, if her senior people are saying that was okay, that's quite reassuring too. Because sometimes they leave the room and they'll go to people like Hannah and say, what on earth are you doing bringing this kind of person into our organisation, because he doesn't know what he's doing, and they'll try and sabotage the process. And I'm going to have to expect someone like Hannah to stand her ground, think this is about change. So you have to be highly involved in it, and it's not a retail experience.
Should we go for upper waves?
Waves. We run out, so we do the last couple. Waves.
That's waves 9?
Yeah.
Right.
With the waves, we felt that probably in the early 90s, when the public sector was rich, that we would have been in a position to walk around here with like absolutely.
I think if we move over, yeah, that's it. That's good.
With lots of money, and we could just decide who was the glossiest, and I think that's when we've really fallen foul of the magpie. And I think that with the waves that we've had, quite a big wave, not a tsunami when pearl catchers first came in, but then when Peter stayed with us, those waves are continuing. I think each of all the senior leadership teams have taken something from the Giant Leap. They've made it their own. They may have put different spins on it. They've made it work for themselves and that their frontline police officers. So the waves now and the sustainability of this is still going on, because there was a real dependency, I felt, when I first came into post, where it was, well, what we're going to do when Peter goes, well, who's coming in next? As if that we couldn't really manage without a consultant, and we didn't have the money, and really, by the time that you'd left us, it was a little bit like Nanny McPhee, wasn't it? They didn't like you, they didn't really like you at first, and then when you were going to go, then they decided that they did.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's when really the value of the investment and doing something so different, quite radical and uncomfortable at times, but that we're still experiencing those waves now.
Yeah.
2 years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. So nearly done. I'd like to come back, see if you've got any questions. We have got 2 more. Unlearning. I'm going to major on that tomorrow if you're coming to the Happy Unstoppable Genius You session, because that's what that's about. Is we're at World of Learning here, aren't we? And we all think about our potential and how do I bring that to bear in the world. And I think the assumption at World of Learning And in round learning is we're going to add some knowledge. That's what I need. I need to add a bit of knowledge to my potential, and I'm going to be a hit. My view is I've got to take away something. Actually, I've got a load of potential. I'm getting in my own way. And if I could be less approval seeking, for example, maybe I could lead my life more kind of inside out as opposed to outside in. And maybe that's what leadership is really about. If I want to follow someone who's quite authentic, they're not like a walking Facebook version of a person, they're actually quite real. So one of the unlearnings, I think, is we think we have to move from the darkness to the light. But my view is we have to move towards our darkness and our light and be quite real. So that was the kind of, there's unlearnings to be done, and that's hard to sell when people want to buy stuff sometimes straight off the shelf. How do you try and sell a more complex? We translated that brilliantly for the Chief Constable. He said, bring me some feedback. I said, okay, and I went to a Facebook group that was talking about the Chief Constable, and I said, stop talking about Chief Constable and take a post-it note, one word that defines him on a good day, and one word that defines him on a bad day. And he was our ace of spades, because he's an amazing guy. And he stood up and I did a word cloud for him with all of these words. And it was, my first degree was in psychology. I've done all the questionnaires that you could want, but this was a powerful, visceral piece of feedback for someone. And he stood up there and went through every single word in front of his top 45 senior people. For some people, that was the most profound moment of their career. They still talk about that. He's now framed it and it's on his wall. That level of kind of authenticity, realness is phenomenal. And I think that's what I felt quite safe around, was understanding where his boundaries were and going to those boundaries and sometimes stepping over them a little bit and hearing the shrieks with the eye contact exercise for 6 minutes, which I made them do. But they walked around afterwards going, there's something about having to do something that is quite crazy, that will have some resonance, that is a little bit too far, that says the majority of what you're doing is right on that line. So you're going to step over it occasionally. We also once went for a walk around the park.
Building site.
The Chief Constable, I asked him to choose between 2 exercises, and he chose a third one, which was that we was all going to go and visit the new headquarters. 45 senior police people walking through the building, out through the car park, over to a building site. That kind of went down in mythical history too. So some of the things we did, most of it worked. I think some of the things kind of didn't work so well, and they will be remembered, those 2 things particularly. But I think you've got to have some of those things to mean that you are actually walking on that line, that edge of what's acceptable. You're being disruptive enough. You know, you're not just pandering to the status quo. I think that's everything we probably wanted to say. Any points? Has some of what we've said resonated with what you wrote on the cards? Has it been reassuring or heartwarming or helpful? No? Ready for your next thing? Shall we say thank you very much? Thank you very much for coming along.